Greetings, everyone. Let me start with this story. When I was 23 years old, I met an 18-year-old young lady, and we were all staying at the same place. And a conversation came up about the 18-year-old parents. And this other young lady that was listening to the conversation started making remarks about that young lady's parents. And I stopped her and I said, she has a right to speak, about her parents in that way, but you don't as a bystander, because you don't know her parents and you don't know her whole story. It turned out that her parents loved her so much. And as teenagers, sometimes we want to do our own thing and have our own way. And when our parents try to talk to us, we see them as the enemy. But when we get older, we realize when our children start doing the things that we used to do, we understand what the parents felt and why they acted the way they did. Now, I'm starting the video by saying, first and foremost, condolences to Buju and his family, and to his son who passed away, his mom or his mother's side of the family. And I also want to just use their story as a backdrop and a kind of warning to people. I see a lady come out and speak about the passing of this young man, and it would have been a perfect opportunity to just say some good things about the young man, to commemorate his memories in a positive way. It seemed like as soon as his passing, this lady, regardless of what she was feeling, because I do not know her, came out and had an opportunity to do some good and to encourage others to do good to people who are vulnerable. It is very clear that this young man had a mental health problem. And instead of bringing awareness to that and reminding people to look out for their loved ones and to be sensitive, she came and spewed a lot of junk. And it reminded me of a person, the expression, you give the milk, the cow that gives the milk, and kick it over. Any good thing that she could have done for the young man, to come out and spit all of this out at that time was just very inappropriate, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. And if you ask me, what she was spewing is something she was feeling internal. There's some level of guilt that she was feeling. And you will say guilt is not her kid, but if you are able to look beyond just words, there's something in her that felt guilty and she's trying to put that off. It was not the time to have that kind of conversation. When it comes to mental health and the black body, or the black mind, I should say, it's a whole different ball game. When a person of other descent, other racial background can intervene with their children that are mentally ill, it's a whole different story for the black family. We don't know the details about what led up, at least I don't know, what led up to this terrible end of this young man. But when this woman is saying that, this father, Buju, did not do enough, I'm saying, what are you talking about? In the same vein, she was saying how he sent for his son somewhere. Therefore, the father was engaged. You're seeing pictures of him and his son. And I want you to know, as I was alluding to earlier, that when it comes to intervention as a black parent, it's a completely different experience, a very frustrating experience for black families. Okay? Now, with, for example, a person of another race, their family could go in and say, okay, I'm going to sign an order to have this person hospitalized for a certain period of time. And they sign that and they will not let them go. So many times, black families trying to go in with this intervention, and oftentimes they put it in the hand of the person who is not using good judgment because of their mental illness. And they're then released back into society without the help that they so desperately need. When a black person, or has, especially a young adult, has mental illness, the system puts the onus on that individual, male or female, to decide if they get treatment. They have to agree, and oftentimes someone exhibiting mental illness will not listen to you or I, because for the most part they'll say nothing is wrong with them. And again, it depends on the mental illness that they're struggling with, and so on. So for this woman to cast aspiration on this man taking his son to Jamaica, that sounds like you're saying you should just tie him up with a rope and just drag him home. So it is so ridiculous and so cold-hearted of this woman to come out and cast this aspiration on the father at a time when they're grieving. So she could be shocked, but she said something that made me want to do this video. She said that she called them and they were supposed to bring him to the hospital. Who is them? Because if she called the ambulance, and they would, first of all, they would never let him go on the road. They would take him to the hospital, have him assessed. They might be able to hold him for 72 hours. And after that, they might not have any power to hold him in the hospital, right? Because if he wants to release himself, or he says, I want to go, if he acts out, nobody's going to force him to get help. Nobody's going to keep him against his will, unless he shows that he is a threat to himself or others. People need to know their facts. And I find that Jamaican people do not know the facts about mental illness a lot. I shouldn't say all, I'm just saying a lot. A lot. And sometimes they think you can just talk to the person and say, get over it. Sometimes they think they can just rough you up and you'll be okay. Sometimes they think they look for other persons to blame, when you can't really blame anyone in situations like this until you know the whole fact. And even so, he's an adult and his father lives in Jamaica. There are people who live right here in Canada with their kids who have mental illness, and they have no control of the situation. They have to just sit there and just, twiddle their thumb and wait for a good outcome. So I really resent what she had done. And I know sometimes frustration or fright or guilt can make you do things that afterwards you have to say, why did I do this? It would seem like she cares about this young man. I don't know the story about how he ended up in her home, but maybe, I'm willing to guess at least, that even when he was staying in her house and for her to call someone to get him, he was exhibiting behavior that she could not handle and she was not prepared to tolerate. Let me tell you, because sometimes the thing get hard. It's difficult even for people who have training to handle some of these situations with people with mental illness. And again, it varies. I don't want to pick any particular mental illness, but I'm just saying, somebody, is suffering from a certain mental illness, and when they have a breakdown, OMG, crisis, you got to call 911. And, even they at the hospital, they don't want to deal with it. Their idea of dealing with these kinds of episodes or, crisis is to give them needles, to silence them, to quiet them, to let them sleep all day if they're acting out or whatever. We don't know the details. I'm just trying to educate some people that love to say negative things about people with mental illness or their families. Sometimes you cannot handle it. Sometimes it's too much. Sometimes even the mother or the father doesn't have the ability to deal with it, because at the end, if you're not careful, you will need counseling as well when you're dealing, or you're a caregiver of people with mental illness. Think about these things and stay blessed.